In a world where the golden age of Hollywood feels like a distant dream, there remain a few living legends, stars who once graced the silver screen in its most glamorous era and are still with us today. From unforgettable icons to timeless talents, these 14 stars defied not just the odds of fame, but time itself. As the lights dim and the curtains rise, join us on a rare and emotional journey through the lives of Hollywood's last great survivors, still alive, still shining, in 2025. Clint Eastwood, the last gunslinger.
I don't think it's nice you laughing.
Born in 1930, isn't just a film star, he's an institution. A man whose silhouette alone tells a story. He's the grizzled gunslinger, the quiet rebel, the justice seeker with a clenched jaw and a moral compass that rarely wavers. Known for his iconic roles in Dirty Harry, The Good, The Bad, and The Ugly and Unforgiven, Eastwood helped define what it meant to be a man on screen, strong, solitary, and unshakable. But what makes his legacy so monumental isn't just his presence in front of a camera, it's what he did behind it. As a director, Eastwood proved he was more than just an action star. He became a storyteller of deep human complexity, tackling themes of war, regret, violence, and redemption in films like $1 Million Baby, Mystic River, and Gran Torino. He's one of the rare few who's earned equal respect as both a legendary actor and a visionary filmmaker. Even more astonishing is his longevity. While most actors fade or retire by their 70s, Eastwood accelerated. Well into his 90s, he was still directing, still producing, still creating. There's a quiet strength to that kind of consistency, a refusal to step away, not out of ego, but because the stories never stop calling. He's not flashy. He doesn't chase attention. And maybe that's what's made him endure. In a world of noise, Clint Eastwood's silence speaks volumes. In 2025, he stands as the last gunslinger of old Hollywood. Not just surviving, but thriving. A symbol of grit, integrity, and timeless cool. The kind of legend you don't just remember. You listen for. Mel Brooks, the crowned king of comedy.
I think I'd better straighten myself out.
Born in 1926, didn't just make people laugh. He revolutionized comedy. Known best for The Producers, Blazing Saddles, and Young Frankenstein, Brooks turned the rules of film inside out and made a career out of poking fun at power, tradition, and the unspoken. He's not just a comedian, he's a cultural renegade, a one-man wrecking crew of sacred cows and social norms. His career began in the writers' rooms of early television, working alongside fellow legends like Carl Reiner and Sid Caesar. But Mel wasn't content to write jokes. He built worlds. Satirical, outrageous, fearless worlds. Whether it was turning Nazis into musical theater fodder, parodying westerns, or reimagining horror films with a rubber chicken, he knew exactly where the line was and exactly how to leap over it. But beneath the slapstick and chaos, Mel Brooks is a master craftsman. His comedies are structured with surgical precision. He understands rhythm, timing, character, and story better than most dramatic filmmakers. That's why his films endure, not just as punchline factories, but as deeply intelligent works of satire. He is also one of the few entertainers to achieve the coveted EGOT, winning an Emmy, Grammy, Oscar, and Tony. His talent touches every corner of the industry. And even now, in his late 90s, his wit is as sharp as ever. His interviews are mini masterclasses, his smile still mischievous, and his timing flawless. In 2025, Mel Brooks is comedy royalty, not because he demanded the crown, but because he earned it. By breaking rules, by laughing at fear, by showing us that sometimes the best way to deal with the darkness is to throw a pie in its face. And after all these years, the king is still standing and still making the world a little less serious, one joke at a time. Rita Moreno, the indestructible star of stage and screen.
I'll get a terrace apartment.
Better get rid of your accent.
Born in 1931, is a woman who refused to let Hollywood define her. Known best for her powerful, scene-stealing role as Anita in West Side Story, she didn't just captivate audiences, she made history. Moreno is one of the few to ever achieve EGOT status, winning an Emmy, a Grammy, an Oscar, and a Tony. But her journey to that stage was anything but smooth. She arrived in Hollywood as a teenager from Puerto Rico, talented, determined, and radiant. But what she found was a system that tried to box her into stereotypes. She was cast in roles that reduced her heritage to a cliché, often forced to darken her skin or speak in broken English. It would have been enough to break anyone. But not Rita. She fought and she rose. When she danced across the screen in West Side Story, 1961, she didn't just play Anita. She became her. Fiery, heartbreaking, unforgettable. Her Oscar win should have launched her into the stratosphere. Instead, it left her in limbo, as Hollywood struggled to see her beyond one incredible role. Still, she persevered. She moved to the stage, conquered television, and kept pushing the boundaries of what was allowed for a woman like her. She won awards. She made headlines. She paved the way, not just for Latina actresses, but for anyone who has ever been told to stay in their lane. Even now, in 2025, Rita Moreno is active, appearing in interviews, documentaries, and film cameos, not as a relic of the past, but as a vibrant force of wisdom and charm. Her presence is electric. Her spirit, indestructible. She's more than a performer. She's a pioneer, a survivor, and a spark that refuses to fade. Hollywood didn't make her. She made herself. And in doing so, she made history. Dick Van Dyke, the eternal showman.
That's the time to stand, to strike up the band, and tell them that you've just begun.
Born in 1925, stands as one of the last remaining icons from Hollywood's golden age of musical charm and classic television magic. Known for his roles in Mary Poppins, Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, and The Dick Van Dyke Show, he brought a unique combination of physical comedy, warmth, and effortless likability to everything he touched. He wasn't just a performer, he was a full-spectrum entertainer, a man equally comfortable with slapstick as he was with heartfelt drama, whose timing was as sharp as his smile was sincere. Van Dyke began his rise in the early days of television, but it was his breakthrough sitcom, The Dick Van Dyke Show, that etched him into the American consciousness. As Rob Petrie, he played a modern, fumbling yet lovable husband and father at a time when TV was still defining itself. The show was sophisticated, fast-paced, and intelligent, and Van Dyke's performance turned a generation of viewers into lifelong fans. Then came the musicals, Mary Poppins most of all, where his charm seemed to defy gravity, quite literally. Even when critics questioned his accents, audiences never stopped embracing him. His secret has never been just talent. It's his irrepressible spirit. Over the decades, Van Dyke faced personal struggles, aging, and a shifting industry that left many of his peers behind. But he endured, not with bitterness or retreat, but with optimism and energy. He remained active in television, film, and stage appearances well into his 90s, often surprising fans with spontaneous dance routines, musical performances, or red carpet charm that defied the expectations of age. In 2025, at 100 years old, Dick Van Dyke remains a beacon of positivity in an industry that often takes itself far too seriously. He is not simply a relic of the past. He is a living reminder that joy, discipline, and generosity of spirit never go out of style. In a career that spans over 7 decades, he has become more than a star. He is a symbol of enduring kindness, boundless creativity, and the timeless power of a genuine smile. Sophia Loren, the eternal empress of the silver screen.
Good evening, Mr. Donatello.
Holy jumping cow.
Born in 1934, remains one of the most enduring and revered figures in global cinema. Hailing from the war-torn streets of Naples, she rose from poverty to become not just a movie star, but an international symbol of grace, intelligence, and unshakable strength. Her face, once described as a masterpiece of classic beauty, graced the covers of magazines and posters around the world. But Loren was never content to be just a pretty image. She was, and always has been, a woman of remarkable depth, both in life and in her work. Her breakthrough came in the 1950s when she began appearing in Italian films that showcased her natural charisma and raw dramatic instincts. But it was her performance in Two Women, a devastating portrait of a mother trying to protect her daughter during wartime, that redefined her legacy. The role earned her an Academy Award for Best Actress, making her the first performer ever to win an Oscar for a foreign language film. It wasn't just a victory for Loren. It was a turning point for international cinema, proving that true artistry transcends language and geography. Throughout the 1960s and beyond, Loren maintained a rare duality. She could exude regal glamour in one film and portray quiet, aching vulnerability in the next. She starred alongside the greatest leading men of her time, Cary Grant, Marlon Brando, Marcello Mastroianni, and never once was she overshadowed. Her screen presence was magnetic, her instincts impeccable. Off-screen, She carried herself with dignity and discretion, choosing privacy over publicity and family over fame. In recent years, Loren has chosen her appearances carefully, often preferring a life away from the cameras. Yet even in those rare glimpses, a film premiere, a quiet interview, a candid photo, she radiates the same poise that first captivated the world nearly 70 years ago. In 2025, at 91 years old, she is more than a legend. She is a living embodiment of cinema's golden promise, that beauty, intellect, and artistry can coexist, and that true stars never lose their light. Shirley MacLaine, Hollywood's cosmic trailblazer.
I managed in a few decades to marry the two most worthless men in the universe.
Born in 1934, is a woman who never followed the rules, not in life, not in Hollywood, and certainly not in the roles she chose. Known for her Oscar-winning performance in Terms of Endearment and a career that spans over 7 decades, MacLaine has built a legacy not only as a bold and fearless actress, but as one of the most singular personalities to ever come out of the studio system. She defied expectations at every turn, refusing to be confined by anyone's idea of what a leading lady should be. Her early work in films like The Apartment and Some Came Running established her as a new kind of screen presence, direct, emotionally exposed, and never ornamental. She could be funny without softening her intelligence, romantic without surrendering her independence. As the 1960s gave way to more introspective and challenging stories, MacLaine met the moment, choosing roles that explored grief, female identity, aging, and self-worth with a raw honesty that few of her contemporaries dared to touch. But MacLaine's story extends well beyond the screen. She became equally well-known, and sometimes controversial, for her deeply personal writing, which explored spirituality, reincarnation, and metaphysics. She wrote best-selling memoirs that invited readers not just into her life, but into her mind. While some rolled their eyes, others found inspiration in her fearless pursuit of truth beyond the physical world. Through it all, she remained undeterred, unapologetically authentic, and, most importantly, curious. That same curiosity continues to define her presence in 2025. Now in her 90s, she remains active in select interviews and public appearances, sharp as ever, with a wit honed by decades of watching Hollywood shift, collapse, and reshape itself. Her life reads like a novel, not a fairy tale, but an honest, rugged, and fully lived story of survival, reinvention, and evolution. Shirley MacLaine is not simply a survivor of old Hollywood. She is its spiritual rebel, its restless philosopher, and its most enduring free spirit. Her career isn't just a timeline of roles, but a long, defiant question that she continues to ask. Why settle for anything less than truth? James Hong, the relentless force behind 1,000 Faces.
Shut up, Mr. Burton. You are not brought upon this world to get it.
Born in 1929, is a name that deserves to be carved into the very foundation of Hollywood, not just for the volume of his work, but for the force of will that built it. With more than 700 credits across film, television, voice acting, and theater, Hong may be the most prolific actor alive today. He is best known for roles in Big Trouble in Little China, Blade Runner, Kung Fu Panda, and most recently, the Oscar-winning Everything Everywhere All at Once. But to reduce his legacy to a few highlights would be missing the point entirely. James Hong is not just a character actor. He is the embodiment of perseverance in an industry that for decades refused to make space for him. In the early years of his career, he was often offered roles that were narrow, demeaning, or outright stereotypical. Rather than walk away, he leaned in. He brought dignity, precision, and presence to every role, elevating even the smallest parts into something memorable. Through humor, gravity, or eccentricity, he carved out an unmistakable identity in a system that tried to make him invisible. But Hong's influence didn't stop at acting. In 1965, he co-founded East West Players, the first Asian-American theater company in the United States. At a time when opportunities for Asian performers were almost non-existent, he helped build a space where stories could be told authentically and careers could be launched without apology or compromise. It was an act of cultural resistance and of legacy building that would benefit generations to come. What makes his career extraordinary isn't just its duration, it's the fact that he's never coasted. In his 90s, James Hong is still performing, still stealing scenes, and still evolving. His role in Everything Everywhere All at Once reminded the world that brilliance doesn't expire. It simply waits for the right story to come along. In 2025, James Hong is more than a prolific actor. He is a monument to grit, a pioneer of representation, and one of the last great craftsmen from Hollywood's deepest vault. He didn't just break barriers, he outlived them. Joanne Woodward, the quiet flame of classic cinema.
Well, my name is Clemmy Shreve, but I'll be glad to change it if you'll stop looking further.
Born in 1930, is one of the most critically respected actresses of her generation. A woman whose name may not echo as loudly as her peers in pop culture today, but whose performances burn with an intensity that helped reshape modern acting. Best known for her Oscar-winning role in The Three Faces of Eve, Woodward was one of the first major stars to fully embrace psychological complexity in film, bringing a new level of realism and vulnerability to the screen during the 1950s and 60s. Unlike many of her contemporaries, Woodward never chased celebrity. Her artistry was quiet but undeniable. She built her reputation on substance, not spectacle, portraying women who were often caught between internal conflict and societal expectation. In Rachel, Summer Wishes, Winter Dreams, and Mr. and Mrs. Bridge, she explored loneliness, aging, passion, and regret with such subtlety that her characters never felt like performances, they felt like people you knew. Her personal life, often tied to her legendary marriage with actor Paul Newman, became a symbol of enduring Hollywood love. Yet even within that narrative, she maintained her independence. She was never overshadowed, never a supporting act in someone else's story. She and Newman collaborated often, on screen and off, and together built a legacy not just of glamorous appearances, but of philanthropic work, theater advocacy, and a commitment to craft. As the years went on, Woodward transitioned into mentorship, directing, producing, and nurturing the next generation of talent. She stepped away from the spotlight gracefully, choosing a quieter life centered around family, art, and the protection of her privacy. In recent years, she has been living with Alzheimer's disease, away from public view, though her impact still resonates deeply within the industry. In 2025, Joanne Woodward remains a revered figure in cinematic history, not just because of her accolades, but because of her integrity. She stood for the idea that film could be more than entertainment, it could be truth. She didn't need to be loud to be legendary. She simply needed to be honest, and she always was. Eva Marie Saint, the quiet strength of the silver screen.
I'm Eve Kendall. I'm 26 and unmarried.
Born in 1924, is one of the last surviving stars of Hollywood's golden age, and perhaps its most refined. Best known for her Oscar-winning role in On the Waterfront and her turn opposite Cary Grant in Alfred Hitchcock's North by Northwest, Saint built a career not on sensationalism or scandal, but on subtlety, intelligence, and grace. In an era often dominated by spectacle, her power came from restraint, from the quiet truth in her eyes, and the delicate control of her performances. She began her career in television, at a time when live broadcasts demanded sharp instincts and perfect timing. But it was her big screen debut in On the Waterfront that changed everything. Starring alongside Marlon Brando, Saint delivered a performance of such authenticity and emotional depth that she won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress, an extraordinary achievement for a newcomer, and one that immediately placed her among the elite talents of her time. Her transition into leading lady roles was seamless. In North by Northwest, Hitchcock entrusted her with a complex and layered character, elegant, seductive, vulnerable, and ultimately heroic. Paired with one of the most charismatic actors in history, Saint held her own, and then some, becoming an integral part of one of the most celebrated thrillers ever made. She was never just a love interest or side character. She brought interior life to every role, commanding attention with quiet strength. Unlike many of her contemporaries, Eva Marie Saint chose to keep her career selective. She balanced acting with family, stepping in and out of the spotlight on her own terms. Her longevity in the industry is a reflection not just of her talent, but of her clarity, knowing when to speak and when to listen, when to perform, and when to simply be. In 2025, at 100 years old, Eva Marie Saint is not just a living legend, she is a living reminder of what film can be when it values craft over noise. Her performances still feel timeless, her presence still dignified, and her legacy as enduring as the films that made her unforgettable. Kim Novak, the spellbinding enigma of classic cinema.
Looking lovely as always. Of course, there are fewer lights on than usual.
Born in 1933, was never just a movie star, she was an atmosphere. Known most famously for her haunting dual role in Alfred Hitchcock's Vertigo, she became one of the most iconic and mysterious presences of mid-20th century film. While other actresses were molded into carefully managed personas by studio executives, Novak resisted the labels. She wasn't the manufactured answer to Marilyn Monroe, as Columbia Pictures tried to sell her. She was something far more complex and far less predictable. Her breakout came with Picnic in 1955, where her emotional subtlety and striking looks captivated audiences. But it was Vertigo that transformed her into a cinematic legend. Playing both Madeline and Judy, two versions of the same woman, one real, one idealized, Novak delivered a performance that was understated but devastating. Though initially overlooked by critics, Vertigo would eventually be hailed as one of the greatest films of all time. At its center was Novak, embodying themes of obsession, identity, and illusion with eerie precision. Despite her fame, Novak was never comfortable in the machinery of Hollywood. She spoke often about feeling like an outsider, about being misunderstood, misused, and boxed into roles that didn't reflect who she really was. Rather than play along, she chose to walk away. At the height of her stardom, she turned down major roles, stepped back from the spotlight, and retreated to a more private life, one rooted in painting, nature, and personal reflection. Her reclusive years only added to her mystique, but she never vanished completely. In later interviews and appearances, Novak has opened up about the emotional toll of stardom and the pressure to conform. And in doing so, she's gained a new wave of admiration from audiences who see her not just as an icon, but as a woman who dared to live on her own terms. In 2025, Kim Novak remains one of Hollywood's most compelling enigmas. She didn't follow the path carved out for her. She disappeared into the fog, and in doing so, became a legend you can never quite pin down. Not loud, not polished, but unforgettable. Julie Newmar, the original Catwoman, forever in control.
Let's send you back to Cliffordville, the Cliffordville of years ago, and you can start all over again.
Born in 1933, is a name that still purrs with style, elegance, and just the right hint of danger. Best known for originating the role of Catwoman on the 1960s Batman television series, she became an instant icon, slinking across the screen with feline confidence, sharp wit, and a power that made her as mesmerizing as she was unpredictable. But Julie Newmar was never just a character in a catsuit. She was and remains a true original, a woman who brought brains, humor, and fierce independence to every room she walked into. Before Gotham knew her name, Newmar had already carved out a career in dance and theater. She was a prima ballerina, a Broadway showstopper, and even a Tony Award winner for The Marriage Go-Round. Her statuesque beauty, standing nearly 6 feet tall, turned heads everywhere she went, but was her intellect and offbeat charisma that truly set her apart. She wasn't interested in fitting into Hollywood's mold. She bent it, she reshaped it, and when it didn't serve her, she walked away without a second thought. As Catwoman, she didn't just wear the costume, she owned it. Her performance blended danger and comedy with seductive elegance, crafting a version of the character so definitive that it continues to influence portrayals to this day. Yet Newmar refused to be defined by a single role. She dabbled in real estate, wrote essays, and even earned a patent for a women's fashion invention. She approached life the same way she approached her characters, with imagination, intelligence, and total autonomy. In later years, Newmar became a beloved figure in fan culture and LGBTQ+ communities, thanks in part to the cult classic To Wong Foo, Thanks for Everything. Julie Newmar, a film that celebrated her as more than a star, but as a symbol of self-expression, beauty, and unapologetic individuality. In 2025, Julie Newmar remains a living embodiment of the phrase, ageless allure. Though she has stepped back from public life, when she does appear, she still radiates the same enigmatic magnetism that first made her a sensation. She has always been in control of her image, her legacy, and her story, and like any true Catwoman, she leaves the world guessing just enough to keep things interesting. June Lockhart, the matriarch of mid-century television.
Look, what's happened has happened, and we can't change any of it.
Born in 1925, holds a special place in American cultural memory, not through scandal or spectacle, but through stability. Best known as the loving mother in two of the most iconic television series of the 1950s and 60s, Lassie and Lost in Space, Lockhart didn't play heroes or starlets. She played home. And in doing so, she became one of the most familiar, trusted faces in households across the nation. Raised in a showbiz family, Lockhart made her film debut alongside her parents in A Christmas Carol in 1938. But it wasn't until the early days of television that she found her true spotlight. As Ruth Martin in Lassie, She portrayed a mother with quiet strength, calm authority, and unwavering compassion, a comforting presence in a decade defined by change. Her character wasn't flashy or dramatic. She was real. She was dependable. And that made her unforgettable. Then came the unexpected, Lost in Space. As Dr. Maureen Robinson, Lockhart transitioned from farm life to outer space, portraying a mother and scientist navigating the unknown with logic, love, and unshakable poise. She brought grounding to the show's campy premise and offered young viewers a vision of women in science at a time when such representations were rare. It was a subtle but important shift, one that shaped how audiences saw not just mothers, but mothers who lead. Throughout her career, Lockhart maintained a reputation for professionalism, warmth, and grace. She didn't chase celebrity. She worked steadily, respectfully, and always with integrity. Beyond her acting, she became an advocate for education, science, and the arts, even receiving recognition from NASA for her contribution to popularizing space exploration. In 2025, at 100 years old, June Lockhart remains one of the last living links to the dawn of American television. Her face may no longer appear on screens every week, but the roles she played, the values she portrayed, still echo in countless homes and hearts. She wasn't a star who burned fast and bright. She was a steady flame, the kind that lights the way home. Lee Grant, the fighter who outlasted the fire.
Now I want you to unlock that door, come out of that bathroom, and get married.
Born in 1925, has lived a life defined not by ease, but by endurance. She is best known for her Oscar-winning performance in Shampoo, and for unforgettable roles in the Heat of the Night, Detective Story, and The Landlord. But her story, like her performances, is layered, filled with brilliance, defiance, and a hard-earned sense of truth. She is not only a great actress, she is a symbol of what it means to survive a system that tried to silence her. Her rise was meteoric. At just 24 years old, she received an Academy Award nomination and a Best Actress win at Cannes for her film debut in Detective Story. Critics hailed her as one of the most promising young stars of the 1950s. But at the very moment her career was blossoming, it was brought to a sudden, brutal halt. During the height of the Red Scare, Grant was blacklisted for speaking out at a colleague's funeral, a simple act of conscience that led to more than a decade of professional exile. She could have disappeared, but she didn't. During those silent years, she studied, she wrote, she worked in theater when she could, and she waited. When the blacklist finally lifted, she returned with an artistry deeper, more fearless, and more nuanced than before. Through the 1970s, she became one of the era's most powerful character actresses, collecting 4 Academy Award nominations and finally taking home the Oscar for Shampoo in 1976. But Lee Grant wasn't finished reinventing herself. In the 1980s, she stepped behind the camera, directing acclaimed documentaries and films that focused on subjects most studios avoided: women's rights, poverty, incarceration, and domestic life. Her work behind the lens won her Emmys, a Directors Guild Award, and the respect of an entirely new generation of filmmakers. In 2025, Lee Grant is not just a survivor, she is an architect of resilience in American cinema. She fought censorship, sexism, and political fear, and emerged stronger than ever. She reminds us that true greatness isn't always celebrated in the moment, but it lasts. Her voice, once suppressed, has become one of the most enduring in the industry. And at 100 years old, she is still proof that the fiercest fires forge the strongest steel. Carol Baker, the bold star who walked away on her own terms.
I don't see any naked pictures of you here, Paul. I don't see any pictures of you with your privates hanging out for the whole world to look at.
Born in 1931, burst into Hollywood with a kind of raw, provocative energy that the industry hadn't quite seen before. Best known for her electrifying performance in Baby Doll, a role so controversial it rattled censors and drew condemnation from a Catholic church, Baker didn't ease into stardom. She detonated into it. With a single role, she announced herself as a daring, fearless actress who would not be ignored. Baby Doll, directed by Elia Kazan and written by Tennessee Williams, became a lightning rod in 1956. Baker played a young bride in a repressed southern town, teetering between innocence and manipulation. The performance earned her an Academy Award nomination and instant notoriety. But it also marked her as dangerous in the eyes of the industry, too bold, too independent, too real. She wasn't the kind of star studios could easily mold. Still, Baker went on to build a respectable career in Hollywood, starring in major films like Giant, The Big Country, and Something Wild. She worked opposite some of the biggest names of the era, but the roles she was offered increasingly failed to match her talent. Frustrated by the limitations placed on women in the studio system, Baker made a bold decision. She left Hollywood behind. In the 1960s and 70s, she reinvented herself in European cinema, particularly in Italian and Spanish thrillers. There, she found the creative freedom Hollywood had denied her, taking on complex, often surreal roles in psychological dramas, horror films, and erotically charged narratives. These films, once seen as niche or exploitative, have since gained cult status, and Baker's performances are now recognized as boundary-pushing and ahead of their time. Eventually, she retired from acting altogether and turned to writing, publishing memoirs and essays that reflected the same fearless honesty she brought to her screen work. She didn't chase the spotlight, she simply lived on her own terms. In 2025, Carol Baker stands as a reminder that the brightest stars don't always follow the clearest paths. She challenged the system, stepped outside of it, and carved out a legacy that remains uniquely hers. She may have walked away from Hollywood, but she never walked away from her art or her truth. These 14 legends are more than just survivors of a bygone era. They are the living threads that still tie us to the golden age of Hollywood. Through their stories, their struggles, and their unmatched talent, they remind us of a time when films were larger than life, and the stars who made them felt immortal. Yet here they are, not just remembered, but still here. Still teaching, still inspiring, still proof that true artistry doesn't fade with time, it only deepens. If this journey through cinema's living history moved you, enlightened you, or simply reminded you of what made movies magical, consider subscribing. We're building a space that honors not just the past, but the people who built it. Hit subscribe, leave a comment sharing your favorite legend, and help us keep the legacy of real Hollywood alive, one story at a time. Because some stars never stop shining, and their stories are far from over.